What would you do if you discovered that everything you believed about death was completely wrong? Imagine for a moment, you're someone who has spent your entire life ridiculing any idea of spirituality, mocking anyone who talks about life after death, convinced that when everything ends, it simply ends. And then, in a split second, lightning flashes through the sky during a violent storm and strikes you dead in your tracks. Your heart stops. 4 minutes without a beat. 4 minutes clinically dead. But here's the shock. Your consciousness doesn't disappear. On the contrary, it expands in ways you never imagined possible. This is the true story of a religious skeptic whose reality was shattered in the most brutal and life-changing way possible. And he's not alone. Right now, there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of people around the world who have had near-death experiences and come back with accounts so similar, so accurate, that even science is trying to understand what really happens when we cross that invisible line between life and death. Have you ever experienced something inexplicable that completely changed your perspective? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may shake your deepest beliefs. You will delve into the devastating testimony of someone who believed in absolutely nothing related to the spiritual world, but who was forced to reconsider every conviction after seeing what exists on the other side. And the most disturbing detail? Science still can't fully explain what these people experience. The most shocking account will leave you speechless, so don't leave until you know the whole truth. Because what happened that rainy day wasn't just an accident. Before I continue, I need to tell you something. If this subject touches your heart in any way, if you've been through something similar or know someone who has had an inexplicable experience, leave here in the comments what struck you most. It could be a question, a story, or even the skepticism you're feeling right now. This exchange is what transforms this channel into a true community of people seeking answers to life's big questions. And look, if you're enjoying the content so far, click like now, because your participation is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who need to hear stories like this. And if you want to continue exploring the mysteries of spirituality, near-death experiences, and everything that science still can't explain, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. This way, you won't miss any videos that could completely change the way you view life and death. This isn't just entertainment, it's a journey of discovery we take together. Now, let's get to what really happened that day when the impossible became real. The moment when a man who laughed at the idea of soul and transcendence was violently ripped from his own body. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Nothing about that day indicated that the man's life was about to be turned upside down. He woke up, had coffee, complained about the traffic, and answered emails at work. The usual routine. That routine we all know, where the days blend together and all seem the same. But life has a brutal way of reminding us that nothing is permanent, that everything can change in the blink of an eye. And that's exactly what happened when he decided to leave the office early because of the approaching storm. The sky was already overcast, the kind of heavy, dark cloud that seems to suck the light out of the day. The wind was picking up by the minute, shaking the trees violently, and the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. He ran toward the car parked across the street, trying to shield himself with the briefcase over his head. It was only seconds before a blinding flash ripped through the sky, followed by a boom so loud it felt like the whole world was exploding. And then the impact. The lightning struck him squarely, coursing through his body with an absurd voltage capable of frying any electrical system in milliseconds. And the human body, after all, is still a complex electrical system. Witnesses nearby reported seeing his body thrown backward like a rag doll. The smell of burning in the air was unmistakable. People rushed to help, screaming, panicking, calling emergency services. But he heard none of it. Because at that very moment, his perception of reality was being completely shattered. The initial pain was indescribable. He later said it felt as if every cell in his body was being set on fire simultaneously, a burning sensation that came from the inside out, impossible to escape. But this agony lasted only a split second. And then suddenly nothing. Absolute silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of no sound at all. As if the world's volume had been cut off completely. And here begins the part that defies all logic. Because what he experienced in the following minutes makes no sense at all to someone who believed that consciousness is simply a product of the brain working. His heart had stopped. Paramedics later confirmed that he was clinically dead for a full 4 minutes. No heartbeat. No pulse. No breathing. Medically speaking, he was dead. But his consciousness? It was more alive than ever. He describes the sensation as being instantly transported out of his own body. It wasn't gradual, It wasn't confusing. It was clear, sharp, real. He found himself floating about 10 feet above the ground, looking down, and there he was. His own body motionless, sprawled on the wet sidewalk, with people all around him trying to revive him. Imagine for a second the shock of seeing this. Imagine being there, thinking, observing, feeling emotions, but at the same time seeing your physical body completely inert. The question hammering at his mind was simple and terrifying. How can I be thinking if my heart has stopped? How is it possible to be conscious without a functioning brain? This goes against everything we've learned about the nature of consciousness. And yet, there he was, more present and alert than at any time in his life. He could see every detail of the scene. The panicked expression on the face of a woman holding an umbrella. The reflection of emergency lights beginning to appear in the distance. The raindrops falling, but to him they seemed to move in slow motion. And the physical sensation was something completely new. He said he felt no weight. No gravity. It was like being suspended in something that wasn't air, but also wasn't nothing. An absolute lightness unmatched in the physical world. And along with this lightness came an inexplicable peace. It wasn't just the absence of pain or fear. It was the presence of something greater, a profound tranquility that penetrated to the core of his existence. For the first time in his life, he wasn't worried about anything. He didn't think about bills, problems, or conflicts. All of that seemed utterly irrelevant in that state. And this feeling was so intense, so overwhelming, that he began to understand why so many people who have near-death experiences say they never want to come back. But here's the detail that disturbed him most when he returned. During this entire time, he was completely lucid. It wasn't a confusing dream. It wasn't a disordered hallucination. His thoughts were coherent, his memory was intact, he knew exactly who he was and what was happening. The only difference was that he was no longer trapped in his physical body. And this, for a skeptic who had always maintained that the mind was just brain chemistry, was simply impossible to process. How do you explain thought without a brain? How do you explain perception without eyes? How do you explain emotion without a functioning limbic system? These are questions that shook the foundations of everything he believed about the nature of reality. He tried to move, and it simply happened. There was no physical effort, no muscles to contract. He thought about moving, and his consciousness moved. It was so simple, and yet so profoundly strange. He floated a little higher, watching the paramedics arrive, opening the equipment bag, preparing the defibrillator. He could hear, but not with his ears. It was as if the information simply came to him, without intermediaries. And then something he hadn't expected began. A feeling of being pulled, as if something were drawing his attention away from the chaotic scene. He looked up, or what seemed like up, and saw something forming in the distance. This transitional moment between being above one's own body and beginning to perceive something beyond is described by thousands of people around the world in incredibly similar ways. And that's what makes these experiences so simultaneously fascinating and disturbing. Because we're not talking about one or two people with isolated stories. We're talking about consistent patterns that repeat themselves regardless of culture, religion, or prior beliefs. And our protagonist, who spent his life mocking these stories, was about to experience each of them firsthand. Or rather, outside his own skin. The hidden truth about these experiences is that they don't choose who will go through them. It doesn't matter if you're religious, atheist, agnostic, scientist, or mystic. When you cross that line, seemingly everyone experiences something. And the decisions we make about how to interpret these experiences after we return are what define the journey of transformation that follows. For him, this journey was just beginning, and the impact of what would come in the next few moments would change not only his mindset about death, but about everything related to the purpose and meaning of life. Comment there, I would feel that peace. What happened to him is not an isolated case. In fact, there are such consistent patterns in these experiences that researchers around the world have been intrigued. We're talking about thousands of accounts collected over decades, and what's most striking is that these people describe virtually identical elements, even though they've never met or exchanged information. It's as if there's an invisible script everyone follows when they cross over to the other side. The first of these patterns is the most famous, the tunnel of light. About 92% of near-death experience survivors describe exactly the same thing. A dark passage, like a tunnel, and at the end, a bright light that doesn't hurt the eyes but attracts irresistibly. Our protagonist saw this. He felt as if he were being pulled at breakneck speed through this tunnel, and the sensation was both terrifying and comforting. The light at the end wasn't just visual, it radiated pure love. The second pattern is even more disturbing: encounters with loved ones who have already passed away. And this is where it gets interesting, because we're not just talking about grandparents who died years ago. There are documented cases of people encountering relatives they didn't even know had died. Imagine the revelation when they return and discover that the uncle they saw on the other side actually passed away days earlier, but the news hadn't reached them yet. This happens too often to be a coincidence. The third element is the complete life review. It's not a vague recollection, but literally reliving every moment of your existence simultaneously, like watching a movie at 360 degrees, where you feel not only what you felt, but also the impact of your actions on others. Every word spoken, every gesture, every decision. Everything is shown unfiltered, unapologetic. It's a raw truth about who you really were. The fourth pattern is the feeling of absolute, unconditional love. Everyone talks about it. A loving presence that doesn't judge, that simply accepts completely. It's described as something unparalleled in normal human experience. A peace that words simply can't capture. And the fifth pattern, perhaps the most revealing of all, reluctance to return. The vast majority of people who experience this don't want to return to their bodies. They beg to stay. And that says a lot about the nature of this experience. Dr. Raymond Moody, a pioneer in these studies, and Dr. Bruce Grayson of the University of Virginia have documented hundreds of such cases with scientific rigor. The insights these researchers uncovered have changed the way science views consciousness. Comment there, I wanted to experience this. But back to our skeptic. What made his experience impossible to ignore were the details. Details he simply couldn't have known. When he finally returned to his body and woke up in the hospital 3 days later, he began describing things that left the doctors completely baffled. He described with surgical precision the emergency room he was taken to. Not just the layout of the equipment, but specific marks on the ceiling, a coffee stain on the wall behind him, out of his field of vision. He replayed entire conversations the doctors had while working on him. Technical conversations about procedures, the severity of the burns, and the decisions being made at that moment. A nurse turned pale when he mentioned that she had told a colleague about being worried about her daughter's birthday the next day. This happened while he was unconscious, his heart stopped, and being resuscitated. How the hell did he know this? That's the question no one could answer. And for someone who spent his entire life scoffing at any idea of the soul, the afterlife, or spirituality, processing this was a mental hell. Imagine the cognitive dissonance. Your entire mindset, built on years of skepticism, crumbling in the face of an experience you can't deny because you've lived it firsthand. He tried to rationalize for months. He searched for scientific explanations, read about trauma-induced hallucinations, and how the brain can create false memories. But nothing fit. The information he had was verifiable. The doctors confirmed every detail. He was clinically dead during the period he claimed to be conscious and observing everything from outside his body. The electroencephalogram showed zero brain activity during those critical minutes. And yet, he was there present, absorbing information that could only be obtained from being literally outside his own body. The turning point, the hidden truth that made him completely give up denial, was when he discovered something even the doctors didn't know. During the experiment, he floated to another room and saw a child undergoing emergency surgery. He described the surgery, the type of trauma the child had suffered, even the toy that was on the gurney next to him. Weeks later, when he finally had the courage to ask, they confirmed it. At that very time, a child had been admitted with that specific trauma, in that specific room. But this area was 3 floors above where he was being revived. There was no way for him to know. Absolutely no way possible within the logic of physical reality. Right there, science does not explain everything. This is where things get really interesting. Science isn't standing idly by in the face of these reports. There are well-founded skeptical explanations that attempt to account for the phenomenon without resorting to the supernatural. The first of these is cerebral hypoxia, or a lack of oxygen to the brain. When the heart stops, the brain enters a state of extreme oxygen deprivation, and this can cause vivid hallucinations, sensations of floating, and even visions of light. Makes sense, doesn't it? Another explanation points to the release of natural DMT, a substance the brain itself produces and associated with intense mystical experiences. Some scientists believe that at the moment of death, The brain releases massive amounts of DMT as a last, desperate response, creating these elaborate visions. There's also the theory that these experiences are simply the last transmission of the dying brain, a sort of final show of neurons before they shut down completely. These are solid theories, based on neuroscience, and cannot be dismissed lightly. But here's the problem. These counterarguments don't explain everything. And researchers who study near-death experiences know this all too well. How do you explain clear, organized consciousness during complete brain death? When the EEG is flat, there's no measurable neural activity. Zero. And yet, these people come back with detailed, coherent, chronologically organized memories. How do you explain verifiable information obtained outside the body? We're not talking about vague impressions or diffuse sensations. We're talking about concrete data that can be checked and confirmed later. And perhaps most impressive of all, there are documented cases of people blind from birth who had near-death experiences and visually described their surroundings. People who have never seen anything in their entire lives can suddenly describe colors, shapes, and faces. This completely contradicts any explanation based solely on brain hallucinations. And there's another crucial point that can't be ignored: the profound and lasting transformation these experiences cause. It's not just a pleasant memory that a person carries with them. It's a radical shift in mindset, priorities, and values. People who have near-death experiences often abandon their careers, completely change their lifestyle, lose their fear of death, and develop an inexplicable compassion for others. These aren't the characteristics of someone who had a passing hallucination. They're the hallmarks of someone who experienced something real and transformative. Regardless of your beliefs, one thing is undeniable: these experiences transform lives forever, and that alone deserves our attention. Comment there, there's something bigger going on. And you know what's most fascinating about all of this? It's not just the experience itself, but the message that virtually all of these people bring back. There's a pattern so clear, so universal, that it's impossible to ignore. And our skeptic, the man who spent decades ridiculing any idea of transcendence, returned completely transformed. He lost his fear of death. Completely. And here's the interesting thing: when you lose your fear of dying, you gain the courage to truly live. He quit the corporate job he hated, reconnected with the family he'd neglected for years, and started volunteering. His journey from skeptic to someone with genuine purpose happened because he saw something that changed his perspective on everything. And the message he brought is the same one thousands of other survivors echo: love and connection are the only things that truly matter. During that life review he experienced, every important moment had nothing to do with material achievements, promotions, or possessions. It was about the moments he was kind to someone, or cruel. The times he chose love or selfishness. Every human interaction carried a weight, a resonance he could feel amplified. All the material accumulation he had pursued his entire life lost its meaning in that state. The car, the house, the bank account, none of it seemed relevant. Zero. The real impact was in the day-to-day decisions, in the words he chose to say or keep silent, in the small gestures he never thought mattered. He spent his entire life trying to prove that nothing exists after death, constructing arguments, debating, and ridiculing those who thought differently. And then his death itself proved otherwise in the most brutal and irrefutable way possible. The revelations he brought are not about a specific religion or dogma. They are about something much deeper. Every action, every word, every thought carries real weight. Everything echoes. Everything is somehow recorded in the invisible web of existence. And the hidden truth behind all these experiences is that we live as if we have all the time in the world, as if our choices don't matter that much, as if we can postpone kindness, forgiveness, and true love for later. But what about you? What would you do differently if you knew for sure that consciousness continues? That the people we love truly await us somewhere? That our choices resonate far beyond this physical life? Would you continue accumulating things or investing in moments? Would you continue harboring grudges or seeking reconciliation? Right there, I would change everything. If you've made it this far, I know this topic resonated with you in some way. And look, this isn't just any old time-killer content. We're talking about deep questions about existence, about what truly matters when everything is put into perspective. And if this kind of conversation resonates with you, if you want to continue exploring the mysteries of consciousness, spirituality, and these experiences that science is still trying to understand, then subscribe to the channel. Every week I bring you stories, accounts, and reflections that will make you question reality in ways you never imagined. And tell me in the comments, write "This message was for me," if you felt this video came at the right time in your life. It's incredible to see how many people are going through similar journeys, questioning the same things, seeking the same answers. We create a real community here, you know? It's not just about watching and leaving. It's about sharing, exchanging, and growing together. And if this content really resonated with you, click like now. This will help more people find this video. And who knows, the story you just heard might change the perspective of someone who needs to hear exactly that today. There's a video right here that expands on this topic in a way you won't want to miss. Click through and stay with me there, because the conversation is just beginning. We'll see you soon.